Are your Dungeons and Dragons fights feeling a little stale and predictable? Are your player characters just mowing down enemies with ease, making the game less satisfying and dramatic? A lot of Dungeon Masters have difficulty challenging the characters in combat, especially as the levels progress. And while combat is not everything, it is certainly a huge part of D&D. And if it becomes boring, then the game becomes a lot less fun. A quick fight that makes the PCs feel incredibly powerful is great once in a while, but having the game stuck on easy mode eventually saps the enjoyment out of playing and the drama out of the story. You can always increase the number of enemies and max out their HP, up their damage output, or my personal favorite, send them in waves. But in this video, we're talking about the biggest factor in how challenging a combat can be: monster tactics. Before we get into it though, I want to clear the air and establish up front that it is not about pitting the Dungeon Master against the players. As much as the monster CR system isn't perfect at best and power creep is real, there is always a fundamental power imbalance that favors the Dungeon Master because the DM can do anything. You can make up a monster whole cloth, say they have 20 actions per round, right? One per each initiative count, and make them immune to everything but psychic damage. It's just not a fair competition. So we're not trying to win D&D, okay? The Dungeon Master is not the antagonist. The DM should actually be the player character's biggest fan. In fact, in most of my games, I like to set the stage, set the table, and then roll everything out in the open so it's clear the dice are doing things, not me. I do my best to run the monsters optimally, realistically, but I'll also help the players walk through their options and figure out what they can do. Everyone should try to help everyone remember their abilities and conditions and inventory. It's a complicated game, after all. Though I find that the players are a little more reluctant to do it for the DM, since it's a bit like being the kid who reminds the teacher that they forgot to assign homework right before class ends. But players, help your Dungeon Masters out. And Dungeon Masters, don't just focus in on ways to counter the player character's cool abilities. Give them opportunities to shine and be awesome. Shoot at your monks, throw a bunch of low-level undead at the clerics. Let them do their cool thing. We want them to survive and thrive, right? Save the day, be the heroes, see all the cool stuff we've prepped after this. But the monsters... well, the monsters want to kill them, and most players are going to get way more satisfaction out of overcoming worthy adversaries than just a bunch of nerfed goons who do dumb stuff and lose on purpose. And come on, most of these monsters are going to know how to fight. If you want a breakdown for each and every monster in the monster manual, I cannot recommend this book enough. In The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Keith Amon analyzes the strengths and abilities of each and every creature, lays out the best way to play them. He also has a sequel for Volos and Mordenkainen's, another on player character tactics, and he just released a new one on defensive dungeon design, which I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on. These books and the blog that spawned them are an incredible D&D resource, and I'm going to include links down below in the description. But in this video, we're taking a look at more general strategies that almost any creature could implement. And sure, some of them are better suited for some types of monsters more than others based on core strengths, lore, flavor, but pretty much anything with intelligence could enact most of these. In fact, a pack of wolves could do some of them. They have an intelligence of 4 or 3, so yeah, use your imagination and you can get a lot of mileage out of these moves. I'm going to start with my favorite, the Feigned Retreat. I like having the enemies break and run away in different ways sometimes because it emphasizes a lot of things that D&D does so well and that set it apart from other kinds of games. It creates a more realistic, believable world that is alive and reactive. The second the baddie isn't just standing there and fighting until it dies but starts to flee, the players are faced with a choice and a host of new possibilities. They can let it go, right? Claim victory, but that monster might come back with reinforcements. They can go try to capture the thing, interrogate it, gain some information, maybe even ransom it, use it as a negotiation piece, or they can try to chase it down and kill it. And that's the most likely outcome. You know it, I know it, and the monsters know it. So maybe sometimes the monsters use this knowledge to their advantage and employ one of the oldest and most successful tricks in the book, the Feigned Retreat. If I can get you to break ranks and charge into a different location, one deeper into my territory where my allies and I have prepared, you might be in some real trouble. You thought you were winning the battle and ran headfirst into my trap. And now that can mean different things. Maybe it is literally a trap, right? You dash into a spiked pit beneath an illusory floor. Maybe I've led you into a much more dangerous creature's lair, or maybe my allies are about to employ one of the other tactics on our list here: ambush, flanking or envelopment, or using defensive positions. Now, ambush is a pretty basic strategy that almost any type of creature might attempt. Gaining surprise can be a huge advantage in D&D combat. If my stealth beats your passive perception, I basically get a free round to attack you before you can do anything. I might even give my monsters, who are prepared and have home field advantage on their stealth check. But if we're in the midst of initiative, right, and say chasing a fleeing enemy into the next room of the dungeon, the player characters know they are in combat and won't be surprised. Plus, I'm not going to take a round of actions away from them. But there might be monsters in that room you just rushed into who are holding their action, and the first player into this ambush is going to have a bunch of attacks heading their way. And low dex, heavily armored adversaries, might not have a lot of luck sneaking up on PCs, but they can still get the drop on them if they're set up and know that they're coming. The next combat tactic that can be combined with an ambush or a feigned retreat, and this is the big one. If you go look at war games or military history, you'll find many variations of this strategy. And I want to use the term flanking here, but that actually has a specific meaning in this game already for good reason. It's a rule variant where if two characters are on opposite sides of an enemy, they both gain advantage on their attacks. And it makes sense because it's hard to defend yourself from two sides at the same time. It's true for an individual and it's true for groups. And that's why flanking has always been such a powerful combat tactic, IRL. Depending on class composition, odds are your party has a front, right? Someone has better survivability from higher HP, AC, abilities, and typically they'll present themselves as the target, and then you'll have the squishier glass cannon types in the back trying to avoid attacks. But if the enemies suddenly attack from the side or manage to get all the way around back and envelop the party, the battle is going to become much more dangerous now that the wizard or the sorcerer suddenly find themselves on the new front line. You can have enemies coming out of side chambers after the first round of combat, or use the pincer move, the old divide and conquer, or again, feign retreat to get the enemy in position to be enveloped. Now, if you really want to turn up the challenge here, we can add defensive positioning. Cover's huge in D&D as well, and I find often underutilized, mostly because missing is not fun. But still, once in a while, you give a monster +2 or +5 to their AC, and things can change dramatically. Here's 6 bandits, right? Versus here's 6 bandits, and half of them just flipped over the table to hide behind. Now they're shooting crossbows at you with 3/4 cover. Those are two very different fights. Combine that with an ambush or a feigned retreat into allies with held actions, and somebody's getting hurt. Now, so far, all of this has been mostly for groups, right? Which should tell you something, but maybe you want to run a solo monster. First, maybe take a second and consider how giving a solo monster some friends or allies or minions can really open up your options here, not to mention just simply balance out the action economy. But sometimes the story calls for a singular opponent, and beyond giving them legendary resistances and legendary actions, maybe lair actions, and looking them up in the monsters know what they're doing, we can also have them using these tactics and the environment. On a whim, I typed switchback battle map into Google Images and got this baby in seconds. If I give my big bad the high ground here, it's going to take a round or two for anyone to get into melee with it, maybe more if I give it mobility. Say it's got a climb speed or it's flying, so it can cut these switchbacks. Check this out. The place is covered in snow and ice, right? Maybe the player characters move through it at half speed. Maybe the big bag's got some sort of shove or some knockback attack, and if you get hit, now you're making a strength or a dex save at disadvantage because of the slippery conditions, and on a failure, you're sliding off the edge, losing ground, and taking some d6's worth of falling damage. Maybe we're playing Donkey Kong here, right? And there's a boulder or a giant snowball rolling down these ramps that everybody's got to dodge. It looks like those crumbling walls could still provide cover for sure, especially from attacks coming from below. And I see several things that could be cave entrances or just like hidey holes where reinforcements might pop out, perhaps waiting for the softest targets to pass them first. And it is clearly an entrance to a dungeon up top, right, that our big bad could retreat into, feigned or otherwise, filled with who knows what, just waiting for our heroes. And I could do this all day, but I hope that you've gained some cool ideas from this one and it has inspired you to come up with some of your own. If so, I'd love to see more tactics and moves for monsters getting shared in the comments below. And again, the point isn't to make things things impossible for your players. It's to present them with challenges that they can overcome. And maybe the party gets wise. They figure out how to circle around that switchback stronghold, make attacks from above, maybe with surprise. They could clear this place out, turn it into their own stronghold, luring monsters here by feigning retreats, and making use of all of these cool tactics and strategies to great avail that you just taught them. That sounds pretty awesome to me. If you enjoyed this and got something out of it, I'd appreciate if you consider hitting subscribe and joining us on Patreon. Your support is going to keep us going and growing bigger and better, and you get some cool benefits in the process on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. Get out there, have fun, be kind, and I will see you next time.